Okay. Chassidus stellen die Chudi La und Chudi Tata. Good morning. In the continuing say that I began the shiurim, like somewhat distilling and consolidating for the different Maimoric Chassidus on either the weekly parshas or timely events. So let's continue that approach. Now we are we're in the week of Parshat Vayeitzei. And as I pointed out time and again, obviously, starting from the Alter Rebbe all the way to the Rebbe, we have Maimoric Chassidus on the Parsha, Teir, and there's Teres Chaim from the Mittler Rebbe, and Teir from the Tzemach Tzedek, and then the individual Maimorim from the Rebbe Marash, Rebbe Rashab, Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Rebbe. In addition, even though you don't find it so often in Maimoric Chassidus, there's the most common phrase that the Rebbe used, Teireh Meloshen Heira. So it's really the undercurrent of all Chassidus, that it should all be Heira and Avedis Hashem. Everything should be Heira B'chaim. It's not just Torah concepts, abstract concepts, but they have to all come down to, first of all, to be understood, b'seichel anushi, seichel nefesh habamis, and then in turn, to be defined and applied in real life. And that's the best Even HaBeichen, that you understood the idea well. So this concept is in Chassidus very often, the Even HaBeichen, Ma'aseh B'Peil. The Rebbe turned it into Teireh Meloshen Heira. So what you come away with, and I'm saying this intentionally because a big part of why I'm doing this, not just to give a share, because all of you, wherever you're going to end up in your respective shlichus in this world, whether you'll be actual shluchim in a city, or a Rav, or a Rosh Yeshiva, or a Mechanech, or even if you choose other careers, so to speak, we all know that we were trained to be mashpim, that wherever you are, whoever you meet, you should leave an impact on them. So the best way to do so is being able to translate Torah in Torah B'chaim. When people hear from you a personal message that is relevant to them, that helps them deal with a challenge or a struggle, or any given thing, then it changes the whole picture. It's not just like Yiddishkeit and you're inspiring them to put on film and do a mitzvah, which of course is a ikar, but as the Rebbe emphasizes, when you learn with someone, even if it's not a formal share, but you share with them a thought, you're also engaging their minds and their hearts and their souls, which makes the experience much more pnimizdik. I can tell you from dealing with shluchim for many years, and different conversations, even this past Friday night at the Kinus. So I had a bunch of shluchim in my house, we fabrei till the wee hours. And one of the things, time and again, shluchim feel frustrated. They went through yeshiva, some of them are Talmidei Chachamim, and they know their stuff. And yet they say they feel inadequate when they talk to people in their own community, even people close to them. Like if someone has a challenge with a child. One was talking about someone off to college and how he got affected by this whole woke movement with anti-Israel and all the other stuff. He says, what do I say to this child? And the shliach feels inadequate, like he doesn't know what to respond. So I say, the Rebbe shliach, what do you think the Rebbe would respond? The Rebbe would not be quiet, he'd have something to say. So it's not that I'm not chas v'shalom trying to critique, is the fact is that there's a gap between what we learn and how do you translate that into actual suggestions or advice, even to your own constituents, even to your own people. And obviously, so I said I remember we were sitting around the table, it was like 30 shluchim, so I said, and what do you say to yourself? What about when you have a dilemma? How do you address it? The same problem, because if you can't explain it to someone else, obviously it means that you can't explain it to yourself. Again, I'm not talking about explaining an haskalah. We could understand what is mamala kalam, seviv kalam, and atzmus. We could understand esasvidus and atzilus and lekeiches, levushim. I mean, there's so many things you could understand, but translating that is always poses a challenge. So even the basic battle between Nefesh Elokis and Nefesh Abamis and Tanya, which seemingly would be the easiest thing. Everyone has a battle between whether you're going to do something selfish for the Nefesh Abamis for your own interest, or you're going to do something for the Eibishter, Nefesh Elokis, something transcendent. But still, that's a very basic thing. Everyone understands that. But how do you take the concepts of Tanya and translate that? That's the challenge. So the more you train yourself, the more you actually do it, and not just train it, the more you're going to be successful. And this is like a key to being mashpia on people, obviously. And God forbid if they have to turn elsewhere. Like the same shliach, other shliach told me, he said very often people, I don't have much to say to them. And what do? They either go to a therapist or they end up finding someone else that gives advice. That may not even be good advice, definitely not Teiladik advice. And everything else that evolves from that. So that's one of the main things why my underlying focus here is to try to speak about these now we're talking the Parshas. Early years I did different shiurim, but it was always the same emphasis, which is the Torah Melashon Hara emphasis, but based on Chassidus, obviously. That each letter and each word and each episode and narrative in Torah is your narrative. It's not someone else's story. It's not just a story that happened. It's the story of your life. Some parshas is very obvious, and some parshas need a little more explanation. Like Parsha Metzeda, you're going to find it more difficult to show how it's your life. But still, you learn the Maimon Chassidus and Likutei Torah. Sazia, Metzeda, you start realizing that all these ideas do exist in the Nefesh. And frankly, Sefer Bereshis is one of the easier ones because it's stories of life. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, they all went through different challenges and they all play themselves out. So with that in mind, there's a small little introduction, which itself is, I think, vital because people don't even realize. I mean, for us, maybe it's a given that Torah is Chayenu, Ve'erech Yemenu, and Hera, B'chaim, and so on. But not everybody knows that. Many people you meet will say, yeah, Torah, beautiful book, the Bible. Even from Yidden, we learn it. We learn the Parsha Shavua, we Kriyas HaTorah. But you start saying, so when's the last time did you look in the Parsha to find an answer to your dilemmas that week? What the Alter Rebbe calls Leb Miditzait. That's not so common. Most people, if they have a dilemma, they don't open up the Parsha. You know, and not because they don't associate with their personal lives. Even though it seems like that's the obvious thing, that's why the Torah was given to us. Torah was not just given to tell us stories. The Zohar is very strong about being shale of that. It's not a history book. It's not even a book of halachas. It's not a Shulchan Aruch. Obviously the mitzvahs are there, but you need Torah Shabbat Peh to understand the mitzvah. It's above all a lesson in our lives, which is one of the reasons it's B'Lashon Sipur. So this week's Parsha happens to be one of the easier ones, because all you have to do is look in Eira Chaim HaKadosh, the Chassidus sites, and you right away see the story of our lives. He says it befedish. So what do we have here? The story is that after Parsha Vayeitzei, the battles between Yaakov and Esav, starting from Vayisnetzitzu Bekirba, Lumulum Yemetz, and they're born and they're very two different alter egos. And you have first the story with the Bechira, Nizida Doshim, and then the story with the Brachas. So finally, Esav is, of course, furious and wants to kill Yaakov. End of the Parsha, Yitzchak and Rivka call on Yaakov and they send them off and they say go for two reasons. To run away from Esav and to find a shidduch in Charan, where there he'll find from the family of Avram Avinu and Yitzchak family. So this week's Parsha starts exactly where the last one ends. Vayeitzei Yaakov meBe'er Sheva, vayelech Charana. And then, of course, in the middle of his journey, he lies down which he didn't know at the time was Harabayas Haramiriya, falls asleep, and Vayachlim, he has this dream, and all the haftachas and brachas that the Eibishter gives him, including, of course, the big bracha of Farasti Yom of Akedma. And with that, Yaakov realizes where he's lying. He realizes that this is a moment in his life, that he's going now on a new journey, but he has, as fearful and frightening as it may be, he has the Eibishter's brachas, that Nechi Imach, and that V'shafti B'shalom, and all the brachas that, and with that he goes, continues his journey to Charan. Says, Chassidus brings, by the way, the pasuk, Vayeitzei Yaakov me Be'er Sheva, which is a repeat, already said last week's parsha that he left Be'er Sheva. What does he have to repeat it? Literally a pasuk before. So the Eir HaChaim, as Chassidus cites, in a number of places says, this is the story of Yeridas HaNeshama Beguf. So in other words, Yaakov's story is our story. Every neshama goes a yitzia from Be'er Sheva. Sheva, it refers to the Sheva Midas. Chassidus elaborates, Sheva Midas of Atzilus, Zod Atzilus. Be'er Sheva, that's when the neshama goes. That's why it says in the Medrash that every night when we fall asleep, the neshama is Nizunis, and Nenis, and Nizunis min ha-be'era shel, the different Lashenis. The neshama is drinks from the mayonis of Be'er Sheva, basically, in Atzilus or in the higher elements. And Vayeitzei Charana is the exact opposite from Be'er Sheva. Charana from the word Charan Af Shel Mokim, God's wrath. It's not just a place where there's no Be'er Sheva Giluyim, it's mamish the opposite. Aniva Elam, as the Alter Rebbe calls it, the world that is Cheshach, Tachtenim, She'en Tachten, She'en Tachten Lamatem, Meno Cheshach, Kofel Mechupel, Moli Klippes, V'sitra Achre, as Shem Gevrim Bey, different Lashenis the Alter Rebbe brings from Eitz Chaim, which is to the point that they say, Aniva Af Si'ed. So it's Charein Af Shel Mokim, meaning it's a place that incurs the wrath of Hashem, because Mam is the opposite of Kedusha. And not just Charan, but Charana, as the Maimonim, Tafshin Hey, and a few other places discuss that. So here we have an extreme, the neshama coming from Igra Rama, Lebira Mikta, Vayeitzei Yaakov me Be'er Sheva. Chassidus adds that Yaakov itself, even the word Yaakov is also part of this. Yaakov is made up of two words, or two parts. Yud Ekev. So Tzemach Tzedek explains, I think it's also in Terer, if I recall. The Yud is Yud of Chochmah, the Kudus Yud, the Yud Kevavke, and where does it come down to? Into Ekev. So the name Yaakov itself also hints to the Be'er Sheva Charan balance, so to speak, or spectrum if you wish, that the Yud, the highest level of Yud, is embedded in Ekev. Ekev Sheba Adam is the lowest part of the foot, the heel. As the Ovis that Rab Nosson says that where it talks about Elam Katan Zeh Adam, every part of the body corresponds to another part of the world. So there's like there are mountains and valleys. What is the Malach HaMovis Sheba Adam? He calls Ekev Sheba Adam. It's called the Malach HaMovis. So we even have a Malach HaMovis within us. What does that mean? Because the Ekev has the least amount of chayis. That's why the Ekev hits the ground. It can absorb shock much more. And we learn about Ikvis of the Meshicha. The Moshel Chassidus brings about an Ekev that when you want to test if the water is hot, go into a bath, you don't put your head into the water, you put your foot, your Ekev. Because the Ekev is less sensitive. So it lets you know. So the Ekev is like the Anshe Chayil, the simple foot soldiers that are on the ground soldiers, if you wish. So the different examples of what the Ekev represent. But the bottom line, Ekev represents the neshama as it comes down, as the Yud of the neshama of Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam comes down into the Guf and Nefesh Habamis and all the way into Charan. So even the name Yaakov itself represents that. Later, Yaakov's name will be changed to Yisrael, which is a whole different experience. Li Reish. Mam is the opposite of Ekev. Reish, Li Reish. Not just Reish, Li Reish. Is Yisrael. So that's the contrast to Ekev. So Chassidus explains the difference between Yaakov and Yisrael, two levels of the neshama, how it's Lamaila, how it's Lamato. And obviously the goal is to join them together. So there you have in the first pasuk the story. So therefore, once that's the stage is set, that the whole parsha Vayeitzei Yaakov Be'er is about Nirus and Hashem Beguf, means it's our story. Then the rest of the Pasha is essentially plays out all those details. And every posuk can be informed by this approach. So when a person, for instance, says, I have challenges in life, everyone has challenges. It can be daigas parnasa issues, it can be issues with family, with marriage, with children, people, internal personal struggles. In this country, in this world, they don't know the amount, but they say it's $1 trillion industry, therapy. And if you throw in medication as well, it's in the trillions of dollars. I'm not saying anyone in Kail here or anyone in the Crown Heights, but the outside world where things are not as pure, therapy and medication, for good or for bad, is a major industry. That tells you something. Why? Because people are struggling. Whether they're real things or imagined things or man-made or natural, whatever it may be, people are struggling. So as soon as you associate and say the struggles didn't begin today, we have a parsha in the Torah, and Mamish says everyone has their Charan. So if you translate Charan, it's not just a city called Charan, and it's not even just a concept, Charei Nafshal Mokim. It really refers to anything of this Cheshach Kofel Mechopel of this world. All you have to do is just turn it into aces that relate to the person. So if you were giving a class on this, you would ask the class to say, write down a Charan in your life. Mitzrayim is a similar example in Chassidus. It talks about Mitzrayim, Eloshem, Mitzarim, V'Gvulim. It's not just a geographical country called Egypt. It's a concept that lives on, and that's why B'chol Der V'Dei Chayiv Adam Liras Sas B'Kili Yotzim Mitzrayim, even though we were never in Mitzrayim, many of us, and will never be. The Rambam and others, Paskin, not even allowed to go to Mitzrayim. But as we know, when you look at this, it's not the physical Mitzrayim, it's the Ruchnisdik Mitzrayim. And everyone has their Meitzer V'Gvul. Not going to get into the difference between Charan and Mitzrayim, but just as a dugma. So everyone has their Charan. And at the same time, you have to also know you have your Be'er Sheva. Because even though Vayeitzei Yaakov Be'er Sheva, that doesn't mean it left him. The neshama still has all its keiches. And you also understand when the Rebbe explains, for example, the opening of Tanya. So, one of the questions that Chassidim have asked over the years is that Alter Rebbe brings a Gemara in Nida. Taka, the Alter Rebbe turns it into a whole yesod of tzadikim beinim rishoyim, mashbiya neisi tihi tzadik v'al tihi rosha. But to open up Tanya with that, so the Rebbe says mashbiyin comes from the word shvuah, but also comes from the word masbiyin, from v'chalta v'savata, that the neshama is empowered with keiches. Meaning all the keiches it will need to deal with what? Tihi tzadik and al tihi rosha, which if you want to put it in different aces, be'er sheva and charan. Because we will always have those two options once the neshama comes down lamata. And then the Alter Rebbe continues, nefesh habamis, nefesh halikis. And in some places the Rebbe also explains, and the other Rabbeim explain why the Alter Rebbe begins with nefesh habamis and not with nefesh halikis. Even though Barichas is first starts with nefesh halikis and Perik Beis, but before that, he starts with nefesh habamis. So besides Agdam et Tanisi, because the nefesh habamis comes first in a person's life, but also because that's the challenge. The nefesh halikis doesn't have the problem. The problem is dealing with the nefesh habamis. That's the real challenge for every one of us, and ultimately for the Beinani. So bottom line is, the story of Vayeitzei Yaakov Be'er Sheva, Vayelech Charana, if you just translate the words into in something that you find an example in your life, then you read the whole Pasha differently. Then it's a story of your story, and then you continue and realize a few and I'm not going to go through every detail of the Pasha, I'm just going to choose a few key main points. And the Mamorim talk about so many different aspects of this Pasha. There's the story of the Cholam, there's the story of later the meeting Rachel for the first time. The Alter Rebbe has a whole Perik and Tanya on that. Perik Memhei. And then there's, of course, it's Saint Yaakov, Saint Lovan, that Yaakov was the Vayeitzei, and building his family there. And then finally the end of the Pasha, Yaakov Holach L'Darkei. So a few key points. There's, I think, what was yours? Was it Nun Aleph or Nun? I think Nun Aleph, Tavshin Nun Aleph. Beautiful sikha from the Rebbe, Sefer HaSichas Tavshin Nun Aleph on Vayeitzei. We talked about the Cholam and about why it had to be a Cholam. And Dafka Vayashkev, that the Cholim is a person is lying down where the Reish and Regel are equal. I don't want to go into it, I'm just referring to it. If you want to look inside a little more, it's a very interesting sikh. It's pretty unique. You don't find it elsewhere. The Rebbe Barichas explains the whole difference between being awake and asleep as also part of Golus as compared to Hayinu Kachelmim, to sleep. And Gula, of course, is to waking up. So in a sense, Yaakov's falling asleep is connected to Golus, which just emphasizes the same point. Vayeitzei Charan, you're coming into our world. So Yeridas HaNeshama B'guf is already a Yerida Gdela. But then there's the Yeridas that come after that, especially Golus, because in the time Beis HaMikdash, or even by Matan Torah, it was still Takil Neshama, it was Begufim, down Lamata, so Vayeitzei Charan, but it wasn't as severe. But once we went into Golus, it's yet another Vayeitzei Yaakov, another Yerida all the way into Golus. So therefore the Cholim represents that Matzav. And at the same time, in that very Cholim, Yaakov dreams one of the greatest brachas the Eibishter gives him, and is maftiach him that he will be, not only will he survive, but the Eibishter will be with him, and he'll come out stronger than ever. And of course, Vayazaracha kafara oretz, v'afaratzta yom v'kedma v'tzafeinu v'negba, the bracha of Ufaratzta, of Nachla bli mitzarim, the bracha of Yaakov, which refers to Faratzta, like Bligvul. So talk about a bit about this experience, and we see Taka indeed what happens afterwards. Yaakov goes, and where does he build his family? He doesn't build his family in Be'er-Sheva. He builds his family in Charan. Besides for Binyamin, all the Shvatim and Dinah are all born in Charan, of all places. You would think, okay, Hashem has to come down Lamata, fine, but the fact is, because Dafkin Tachtenim, Dafkin Charana is the place which is the Kavanah, and that's Nesava Kosh Baruch Elias Leis Baruch Dir B'Tachtenim. So Chassidus explains, Alter Rebbe brings in Tanya, Perek Lamed Zayin, other places, that Neshama Atzma Lo Yitzrich Tikkun, the Neshama doesn't need Tikkun, the Neshama didn't come down for its own purpose, because the Neshama is fine. In Be'er Sheva, L'mayla, the Neshama is intact. And Adarabah, the Avavir of a Neshama L'mayla is higher than the Avavir below, even by the highest tzaddikim. Because the fact is, once there's a guf, even if there's no nefesh habamis, there has to be some helam. Even by the highest levels, of course, only a chet melosh chesed, not chaz v'sholem or full anything negative. So the Neshama comes down not for itself. It comes down to be mevara the guv and nefesh habamis and to make a dira b'tachtein. But then there are mamorim that say the neshama itself elevates when it comes down below. You read it say the chaliyah, and some places it even says that the neshama gets a birur and a tikkun as well. So the Rebbe explains a few places where a place that comes to mind is in I think it's in Noyach. Tafshin Lamed Ches. The weeks after the Rebbe had the heart attack, so B'Tzei Shabbos, the Rebbe was bringing them from his room. He spoke from his room, and then he was Magiyah the Sikhs. Some of them are very profound and deep Chassidus Sikhs. One of them, Neyach, talks about relatively about these two different explanations. Is the neshama come down in order for the guv nefesh habamis at tachtenim or for itself? So the Rebbe explains there that it's similar to the two timim for Brias Elam, Samach Vav right in the beginning brings. So there's one time, Legalis Keches, Legalis Shleimus Kechesov, from Eitz Chaim, that the Eibishter created the world to reveal his Keches. But the Rebbe Rashab immediately shale that and says the Eibishter is Ein Kechas Apel. But he has to reveal his Keches. Who for whom and for what purpose? So that's why there's other begin dish tamudim beit. There's other reasons given. Ultimately, tachlis hashleimus, Rebbe Rashab says, is nesava kadosh baruch hu liyas leis baruch dir b'tachtenim. As we see in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe doesn't even bring the other reasons, but in Samach Vav he distinguishes between the two. So that is similar to the same idea. And the Rebbe Rashab is not shayl. Doesn't say Eitz Chaim is wrong. He's saying that Eitz Chaim is talking about the levels of Atzilus or higher levels. In other words, there's the time Habriya and there's different reasons for different levels. But the ultimate, to create Tachtenim, Atzilus is enough. Legalish shlemus kechesav. All you need is chachma, bina, das, chesed, all the way to malchus of Atzilus. That's already megala shlemus kechesav. You don't need tachtenim. Tachtenim, you need nesava kodesh baruch Hu. So the Rebbe says, similarly, the neshama. The purpose of nesava is that the neshama is not for itself. It's coming to make a dira b'tachtenim. In other words, be mevarech Charan. However, in the process, there's also a reason for the neshama itself. The neshama also benefits. It's megala shlemus kechesav because, as Chassidus brings in a number of places, the challenge. Where do you see what a person is made of when there's a challenge? So it's not just for tachtenim. The neshama itself, when it's challenged and there's resistance, and it's in a world, I'm just using the aces from the parsha, Charan nafshal mokim, and he has to deal with a lovan, who is a rosha and a criminal and a deceiver and deceptive and all that brought to the table. That's where you really see the test of a neshama. How does it deal when there's darkness? It's one thing when everything is beautiful. L'mayla, the neshama is not tested. What is the neshama? What challenges does it have? There's no challenges of a goof. There's no health issues. There's no parnos issues. There's no depression. There's no agmas nefesh. Nothing that we deal with in this world exists in Be'er Sheva. It's only in Charan where you have all these challenges. And indeed, that's what you see. Yaakov rose to the occasion. So when the Yud goes into the Akev, the neshama from Be'er Sheva into Charan, the Charan brings out something in us that is just not possible to be brought out anywhere else. The truth is, this of course applies obviously to the concept of shlichus b'chlal. The Rebbe always connects the shlichus in our time to the shlichus of the neshama coming down lamato, and you go dafka to a place that is not necessarily comfortable, a place where you may not even be wanted, a place that l'chatchila is hostile, or definitely there's no idea, no awareness of getlachkeit. And the whole shlichus is Vayeitzei Yaakov Be'er Sheva Yelech Charana, and dafka there you thrive. And you see that. Ask any shliach what he would be like had he stayed in Crown Heights or Kfar Chabad or wherever we originated from. He would tell you, I may have been a plumber or maybe a lawyer or finance or I don't know what, but definitely not to bring out all the keiches. Pasha Pekudei, Tafshin Chav Zayin, Shabbos Pasha Pekudei, that was when the Rebbe first was sending the first kfutz of Bochrim to Australia. So there was the Yeshiva Gdel in Australia, and it was the Tafshin Chav Zayin that chose 6 Bochrim that went that year. It was right before Purim they went, and for 2 years they were going. I was a big chiddush at the time. I was a young kid, so I just remember the tumult about it. And the Rebbe spoke about it in the Fabrengens before Purim. They spoke on Pasha Tetzava, Meidike Fabrengen, Meidike Sichas about Shlichus and about the going and so on. So Pasha Pekudei, the Rebbe touched upon that he's getting letters from people. Because remember, at that point, no one knew the extent of where Shlichus was going. There were at the time maybe 20, 30 shluchim, maybe a little more, I don't remember. By Chav Zayin, maybe more, probably more, 50, 60. I don't know the exact number. But remember, the first shluchim went out in Tafshin Yud Ches, Tafshin Yud Tes. This is only 9 years later. And 8 years later. And here the Rebbe was sending Bochrim for 2 years. And you have to remember, those years, you didn't come back for every Shalom Zacha of your nephew's cousin or something. You went for 2 years, you stayed for 2 years. So it was like a big thing. And people were starting to see that the Rebbe was very serious about the shlichus. Because no one knew, maybe it was like the Frierdiker Rebbe. 20, 30 people went to different cities, they became Rabbanim, and that was that. Here, again, when the Rebbe sent out the Bochrim, parents and others, the Rebbe is really like, it really means what he says. Again, the Rebbe didn't spell out that I want thousands of shluchim. It just became obvious after a while. That's what the Rebbe wanted. So at the time, there was still this debates about how much, to what extent. So the Rebbe said that he's getting letters from people that are like complaining. The children, they're young. These were Bachim, 18 years old, 19. I don't know how old they were that went to Australia. One of them was my uncle. I mean, they were 19-year-olds probably, 20-year-olds. So the Rebbe says getting complaints, and the Rebbe then said these words, interesting words. I'll say it in Yiddish. The Rebbe said, "As divas wollen fordern," meaning on shlichus, wollen blien, they'll blossom. Und die soll nicht werden, wollen ausgerieben werden. That's the Rebbe's words, ausgerieben. What's ausgerieben? The best translation in English is withering. They'll wither. Ausgerieben means you get rubbed out. You're never going to really actualize your potential. I'm just explaining a bit. It's because precisely going and being challenged in a place that's not comfortable, that's not your home. Everybody, it's your home. I mean, you see in many of the clips that go around these days, the Rebbe talks about going out of your comfort zone, going out of a place where you don't have kashrus and a mikveh and a shul and everything. You're going to a place that chatchil is like charei nafshel mokim, but that's where a person blossoms. So it's the second explanation, not just that neshama is there to be mevarer, the chefza of the world, and the nefesh habamis and guf, but also it itself becomes actualized in ways that it can never have become in Gan Eden or Be'er Sheva in the language of this week's parsha. So it's an interesting paradox. How do you explain that? Because it seems like it seems counterintuitive. You'd think when you're thriving, you're a fish in water, you're sitting in a kollel, or you're sitting in yeshiva, you're sitting in an environment of Torah and Yerushalayim, that's where you would thrive. Here you're going to dafka place where there's nisenis, and Befed is the opposite. So human nature, we see it's a given. All resistance is what creates energy. Like if someone were to know, how strong are you? So how strong is your hand? How much strength do you have? There's no way you could know just by holding it up. But if someone resists, pushes back your hand, the more they resist, the more you push forward, the more you see what you're capable of. So this is like a rule, a scientific rule even, that all energy is generated by resistance. They call it positive and a negative. There's no such thing as any power that comes without resistance. With his resistance, that's where you bring out energy. Chassidus brings the example of a dam. There's water rushing, let's say, in a river. So maybe a powerful river, but you build a dam, and that stops the water, so the water starts building up and building up. Do you know how much pressure is built from that? To the point that there's so much pressure today, there's a lot of energy generated, it's called water energy, that comes from dams. And to the point, Chassidus goes, that the energy is so powerful at some point that it can break through the dam, and not only break through the dam with so much intensity, you never would have imagined the water has so much power. But also the dam itself becomes a sakana, because the stones of the dam now are rushing with the water. So Ad Kedei Kach is the power that it doesn't just transform itself into such a strong energy, it also causes that the very Gashmistic thing that was holding it up also becomes part of that forward energy. That's the extent. So when you see that, we saw it many times, it wasn't always so pleasant. The Rebbe Rashab says in Teira Shalom, on this month, on Yutes Kislev, he says, Shver Zogn. It's difficult to say this on the Alter Rebbe, but he would say, the Rebbe Rashab says, he would say that the Alter Rebbe after Peterburg, meaning after he came out of prison, was like Kizayis, that the Gemara says, until you don't press an olive, it does not produce oil. So he's saying it's hard to say this on the Alter Rebbe, but you can say that the prison, which was of course a big Helen Behester, a Charan of the Alter Rebbe, is what brought out the oil, the Primis Atera of the Alter Rebbe that would never have been brought out were it not for the Meiser and the Geula. So that's the way the Eibishter made it. Is it because Nesava Kosh Baruch Aliyas Leis Baruch Dira B'Tachtenim, so Dafke Tachtenim has a power from Asmus that nothing else has, or you can explain it in different ways. However you explain it, bottom line is Meiser Rav. That's what happens. So the ironic thing in life, the secret to life in many ways, is precisely the thing that will make you the greatest, the thing that will bring you excellence, will be the thing you least want to do, the thing you're most uncomfortable with. Because nobody who wants to go into Charan, who wants to go into a place like that. If Yaakov could ask a simple question, he can't find a shidduch somewhere in Be'er Sheva. The Eibishter couldn't make that Rivka should end up there. There's many scenarios here. No, because Dafka and Charan, Dafka and Tachtenim. So that big question when people say, Lama Osa Hashem Kocha, to the point that the halacha is like Beishameh, Nuach la'adam shalei nivra mishan nivra. No, the machlekes Beishameh and Beis Hillel. Is it more pleasant to be born or not to be born? So usually the halacha is like Beis Hillel. In one of the instances, the halacha is like Beis Shammai is in this case. Because if you make a list of everything going on in life, the positives and the negatives, very often you'll come up with more negatives in life than positives. There are plenty of blessings, obviously, and simchas, and everyone should be blessed, but the problem is there are tragedies, there are losses. Everyone, until Mashiach comes, is going to suffer something. And so when you start listing it, the good reason to say, Noach la'adam shalei nivra. If you weren't born in the first place, you wouldn't have all these tzaddis. You'd have only beautiful things. And that's what Beis Shammai paskin. So the Alter Rebbe asked the question, if that's the psak, so why are we born? The answer is, because Noach, it's more pleasant not to be born, but it's more meaningful to be born. That's that. We're not talking about pleasant. So Yofa Shah Achas, so Nachas Shal Kedas Ruach Be'elam Haba Mekol Chai Elam Haza. 1 hour of pleasure in Elam Haba is more pleasant than all the pleasures of this world. But Yofa Shah Achas B'tshuva Meiser and Tevim Be'elam Haza Mekol Chai Elam Haba. Yofa, as Alter Rebbe explains, Yofa means more purposeful. The kavanah. So it's not about, life is not here to make you pleasant. It's not about enjoying life. It's about experiencing what the Eibishter wants, and by doing so, you reach excellence. So as much as a neshama can reach in Be'er Sheva and Gan Eden, it cannot come close to what it achieves down Lamata. So we saw this often, and I mean, again, it was always not easy to see, but never, I'm not going to mention the names, but there were people, whenever they attacked Eden, some Jewish Rosh Yeshivas and so on, from the Litvisher world, you have to see the sikhs that the Rebbe delivered. I remember, I'll just remember just a few that come to mind. I remember Vayeitzei and Shmeis Nun Aleph, Kisove Nun Aleph, Vayikra Nun, we talked about Amzu Yitzhata. So every time he attacked Yidden, the Rebbe was Megala and Machadish, all kinds of deeper ideas in the Maila of Ayid. It was amazing to see. I remember Sove Tafshin Aleph especially. Bamish Chedushim, even what, and it only came because there was a Menagid. I remember we had a joke, eternal joke. We said we should convince him in Bnei Brak he should attack Hemshech Samach Vav and Ayin Beis. So then we'll hear big Chedushim from the Rebbe, like Zayis Kishiketchenes. Obviously, we never went ahead and did that. I don't think we could have convinced him to do that. We thought that, and I think Echte V'ashav doesn't really work. I don't think you can do it. You can't convince the Menagid to do something in order to get... Tainus Tzibur, Lag Ba'omer, all these attacks on Pulis, or even I remember even in Pasha Teldus, this was not him, there was someone else. One of the asifas they had, they like Vatal Yitzchok. The Sikh and Tavshech of Ches, the Rebbe also came out very strong. Every time there was, I wasn't just the Rebbe came out and with a macha. He always came out with a deeper chiddush in that inyan itself, which is interesting. So in other words, it's basically wherever there's a menagid, as I said, resistance, it brings out deeper keiches. That's a fact. That's a fact of life. Now, obviously, we all want it with measure. Everyone should have only that amount of resistance in life. You don't want to have overdone. Some people have, too many challenges, even though the Eibishter gives keich for every challenge. But the point is that what Yaakov heard in the Cholam, that gave him such power, that he knew that even going into Charan, with all the concerns that he had, and we all know what Yaakov said, 20 years he suffered. What's the lashon of the pasuk? He ate chalti kera, the whole thing there that the Alter Rebbe actually brings in Hichos Chevel and Mazik, that he Pashut suffered under Lavan. It wasn't easy at all. And this was after Esav. And then before the Rugzei Shal Yosef. So Yaakov himself is a perfect example of someone who suffered most of his life, except his last 17 years, as he told Pare later. And yet, who gives birth to the Shvatim? Mitoshe Shlema. Not Avram, not Yitzchak, even though they both, of course, were Ovesein Amarkova. Avram Yatzim Mene Yishmael, Yitzchak Yatzim Mene Esav. But Yaakov Mitoshe Shlema. And Dafke Charan, not anywhere else. So that alone is a tremendous lesson in life, because that's where the biggest keiches came out. So it was both in Yonim to go back to sum up, both the Dira B'Tachtenim, to be Mavarer, Sein Lavan, which refers to the Tachtenim of Lavan, as well as to also elevate and bring out the biggest, deepest keiches of the neshama of Yaakov himself. So, since we're talking Sein Lovan, so there's in Eitz Chaim, you know the expression, Akudim, Nekudim, Vrudim. So we know it, most of us from Chassidus, it's from this week's Parsha. It's the 3 types of sheep, which of course when you read the Parsha sounds very strange. Why do we need to know all the details of how Yaakov was tending to the sheep and breeding them? And they came out with the different shapes and colors, stripes, spots, as Rashi brings, as other commentaries bring, as other commentaries bring. So when you learn Chassidus quotes Eitz Chaim, that it says there, Yaakov was Reyet Tzein Lovon. So, and what type of tzein? There was Akudim, Nekudim, and Vrudim. So Chassidus cites the Eitz Chaim that says like this, Lovon is Levin Elyon. Because even though Lovin Lamata is Lovin of Klippa, Elu Mazeh, and we know the Lovin that we know that Yaakov had to deal with, but Besharshe, similar to what it says about Pare, that Lamata Pare was of course Reisha Klippas, Reisha Tanin is called the head of the snake, the head of the crocodile, or whatever, however Tanin is translated. But Lamaila is Paria de Kol Nehurin, because anything that's Nishtalshal, Kol Sheyeda Lamata Mata Yeser, Bo Gavei Gavei B'Yeser, Kol Gavei Gavei B'Yeser, Nafal Lamata Mata B'Yeser. So the Arizal says that Lovan rooted in Levin Ha'elyon. What does that mean? It means the supernal whiteness, pshittus. Of all the colors, white is the most colorless color, and it refers to Keser, the deepest levels of Keser, Levin Ha'elyon. And he continues to explain that Yaakov was mamshich from Levin Ha'elyon into Akudim, Nekudim, and Vrudim. The 3 worlds. Akudim is 10 Eiris in 1 Keli, Akud B'Klei Echad. Nekudim is Toyu, 10 Nekudis, 10 Eiris, 10 energies into 10 containers. And Vrudim is Iskaulus, Tikkun, Atzilus, where the 10 Eiris become completely in harmony and balanced with the 10 Kalim. So it's 3 stages essentially in the process. So you see from this, the bitter of Tzein was not just a side story, it's actually the Aveda of Yaakov, and it's really the Aveda that we all do. Akudim, Nekudim, Vrudim. Just briefly, what they are, 3 levels in Aveda, is like anything in life. You begin first, everything is, think of the development of a fetus, a child in pregnancy. So it doesn't begin with a child with all Ramach Ivarim and Shasa Gidim. It starts with the conception of a cell, 1 cell. So when the seed fertilizes the egg, you get 1 cell, the Eibishter blesses it with an neshama, so you have the 3 shutfim. What is concept? 1 cell. Do you know what a cell looks like? A cell is smaller than 1 strand of hair. That's how small it is. Barely visible to the naked eye. But this cell is now a cell of life. This cell, after 18 hours, will split into 2. And then it will begin splitting into 4, into 8, into 16, 32, 64, etc., etc. Through 9 months, by the time the child is ready to emerge to be born, there'll be almost 100 trillion cells. 100 trillion cells. I think a little less. However, many of these cells are going to die when the child comes out of the womb in order to make ability for it to travel and come and be born. So many cells die. That's why you'll find that a child in the mother's womb, his head is larger and it gets smaller before it's born. I don't know if the number is exactly right that I just said, but one thing is for sure. Each of us have between 35 and 75 trillion cells. We know that. That's a big number, trillion. 1 cell became 75 trillion. This is a perfect example. Why the Eibishter make it this way? Why couldn't he make that just like Adam and Chava were born at 20 years old? Why do we need to have that we have to go through 9 months and all the pain that comes with it, and Sar Chavle Leda, and everything that comes with that? Because this is an example of Seder Shtalshlus, exactly Akudim, Nekudim, and Vrudim. And Akudim is 10 Eiris and 1 Keli. Because in that 1 cell, like in a seed, everything is there. Nothing's going to be added. It's not like through pregnancy, someone adds, God forbid, anything into that cell. That cell itself is concentrated, everything this person is going to be. Everything. And literally like a seed. You see an apple seed from a tree. That big tree of an apple with apples all started with a seed. And then that cell will split. Similar to what Rashi says about Breishis bara l'kim hashamayim v'sa'aretz, that everything was created right away. Then each day it came out, so to speak, like Mehela Mela Gili, or however you explain, Keach Alapel. So bottom line is, Akudim, Nekudim, Vrudim are three stages that the Eibishter made. Everything begins. Esa Eres Alkud B'Klei Achad. Exactly, and a child, of course, it's more than Esa, but the same idea, 10 Keiches in one cell. Then it will split into 10 Kalim, but it's still not properly balanced. And then comes, that's Nekudim, and Vrudim, it'll come a Iskalulus, which is, of course, what Yaakov did. Yaakov is Chesed Gvura, Yaakov is Teferes. Kava Emtsoi, Hiskalulus, he mixes Chesed and Gvura together. Teferes is also from the word beauty. Beauty means the harmony within diversity. As beautiful as the color blue may be, or the color red, as beautiful as one musical note may be, you don't call it beauty. It's just a sound, just a color. Beauty will always be a combination. When you say a beautiful face, what does that mean? Is it the eyes? Is it the nose? Is it the ears? Is it the complexion? Is it the combination? The answer is it's a combination of many different things put in the right order. What best way to say it in English? Harmony within diversity. So Teferes takes all the pratim and puts them into an order that makes it into balance. And that's why Yaakov was Kava Mitzay, and that's what Yaakov was Mamshech. That in a world of diversity, where there could be machlekas, like it says in Yem Sheni, was Nivra machlekas, diversity. Diversity could also be argument, divisiveness. But it could also create iskalus. Like we say every morning. Shnei ksuvim machishim zeh zeh. Okay, so they contradict each other. But then bar kosav ashlishi, teferes, kav ashlishi, kav amtzai, machriya beineim. And machriya doesn't mean it chooses one over the other. It means it finds a way to reconcile the two, to find the milas in each one. And that's why Yaakov podes Avram, because Yaakov Teferes is mamshich Avram Chesed, and also balancing it with Gvura, and building the Shvatim, Shiftei Yudke, building the foundation of Am Yisrael, Davke and Charan. So then when Yaakov goes back at the end of the Pasha of Yaakov Holach Darke, so which of course is the expression we use after we leave the Tishrei holidays, is Yaakov Holach Darke. He's not just going to the Darke, he's going now with empowered, the whole new experience, not just Bekamas, but Be'echus, because what he did was Bekaim Shlichus, and was Mamshech Teferes and Achdus in a world of Pirud, Mamshech Achdus Hashem in a world of Charan, and transformed that and elevated that, which of course gives us the Kayach Maisa of a similar bonim to whatever challenges we have. So this is a somewhat of a summation. Obviously you can elaborate on every of these details more and more, a summation, and hopefully you can use it well in your own life, and above all to also teach it to others in a way that makes Torah come alive, Chayenu, Hira B'chaim. And we should be zeichet to our Yaakov Holach Darke, the Darke of Mashiach Geulah, Chedesh HaGeulah, Chedesh Kislev, even before the later days, Yud Kislev and Yud Kislev, Yud Kislev, Chanukah. Everyone have a very good day.